Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Peter Fenger, and today my guest is Renee Zukin. Renee is an educator, writer, and mental health advocate with more than 20 years of experience helping others use the written word as a tool for self-transformation and empowerment. She's been featured as a contributing author in the Navigating the Clickety-Clack, How to Live a Peace-Filled Life in a Seemingly Toxic World. And her recently released memoir, Every Day I'm Brave, explores how cultivating resilience, compassion, and courage can free us from fear. Passionate about creating safe spaces for growth and healing, Renee inspires others to find clarity, connection, and bravery in their everyday lives. In our episode today, we'll explore Renee's journey of writing Every Day I'm Brave and how journaling, resilience, and self-compassion can help us move beyond fear and everyday ways we can cultivate courage and connection in our lives. Well, I'm very excited to have Renee with me today. Renee, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. I really had a lot of fun reading an early copy of your book and listening to you speak on other podcasts. I've really enjoyed you sort of diving into this. So I'm very excited to share with our listeners your book, Every Day I'm Brave. I'd love to start off with what really inspired you to write Every Day I'm Brave and share your personal journey with anxiety.
I love this question. So it was one of those things that continued to kind of tap me on the shoulder or, whisper the whispers here and there for many years. And I resisted it quite a bit. One of the things that anybody who's challenged with anxiety can probably understand is that there's a lot of fear and self-doubt even in making a decision to speak about your own experience. But what I noticed was even when I would share, when Facebook first came out, if I would share a little snippet of a win I had because I was dealing with something that was making me anxious or an experience, that I would get a lot of feedback from others who were really grateful that I was speaking to it because they were feeling less alone. And certainly other people too were very kind and compassionate, and I got to feel a lot of connection to others just by sharing a little snippet of this. And
Mhm.
and as time went on and as my journey continued, and some challenges became a lot harder to deal with, as I learned and grew and got more tools, the more I realized that speaking about our mental health experience
Mhm.
is really vital in debunking a lot of shame that just
Mm.
makes it all worse. And
Right.
so, it was definitely a process coming to the decision, okay, I'm going to just put this all out there,
Yes.
right? And I knew that I wanted to carefully craft it as both a memoir and a learning tool for others. And it really became that was the impetus to really show up in service to other people for writing this book.
Yeah, yeah. Heavy hitters like Brene Brown talk about how vulnerability is the cure, right?
Yeah.
And sort of to piggyback on that, I'm curious, why did you choose memoir format? And you talked a little bit about including practical tools. How did you balance maybe the storytelling with those practical tools?
Mm. Yeah, it was something that took a little while to work through. I got the support of a writing coach and some fantastic editors that
Mm.
kind of helped me decide, the balance between what's the story here and what are the tools. And ultimately, I knew it was going to be memoir based, but I also really wanted to make sure that this hero, this Shiro on this journey, which of course was me, but but had a real true narrative arc as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
I'm a writer by trade. I love story. I've, taught middle school, high school English. So to me,
Yeah.
personal story is actually a really profound way that we can learn about the human experience and what we resonate with and what we don't. And so for me, it was kind of a no brainer decision
Sure.
to have it as memoir and the work to then curate okay, what are the lessons in each of these chapters?
Mhm.
And how can I provide something helpful to somebody else who might be reading it became the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was sort of reading your book, you include these stories that again became moments of reflection or moments that you created meaning around. I also found it very interesting because, some chapters it'll sort of transcend that moment and there's a moment of reflection, whereas others it kind of just stopped at I recognized there was a problem and I need to work at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, and I love that you noticed it because one of the things that I had to keep coming back to and what I support others in learning is really that the first step is just this awareness.
Mhm.
Like we have to be able to be aware of our thoughts, our feelings, how
Yeah.
we're experiencing a moment in order to decide what we want to do with it.
Yeah. One came off very human, right? It's a
Mm,
very human story. We can find ourselves in it, but I is also a degree of authenticity, right? Like we don't all have solutions for some of these things. And for you to sort of like end on that, I think only shares your honesty
mm,
within those stories.
mm. Thank
Yeah.
you for that reflection. It was really important for me. Like, my message is not, "Okay, I'm cured, I'm healed, I'm
Right.
never,"
Right.
like, we have ongoing challenges as humans. And,
Mhm.
what's most important is what are we learning from them and how can
Mhm.
we grow from them? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I want to make sure this was an, an honest representation.
Well, and then again, I think it really comes down to being okay with not being okay, and I think that that is
Yes.
a healthy representation of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
but I mean, on the other side of that, you're ending each chapter with journal prompts, and you're encouraging reflections, just as sort of you're reflecting within your own stories. So talk to me about why that was important to invite readers into reflection as they read your stories.
I think that it is important, especially for those that may see themselves or even someone they love who maybe has challenges with obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, panic, any of these things. And what I've learned is that the reflection piece, whether you do it like along the way or you come back to them after you read the story, because I've heard people doing both now,
Right.
but for me, it's important that we take that time to reflect so that it can deepen not just the learning from, a bystander. You're not just watching the story unfold like a movie, but to be an active participant
Mm,
in your own life.
mm,
If there's one thing that I feel is really important that we know and understand is that we have the power to change what our life experience looks like and feels like. And
yeah.
we can only do that if we're willing to look at it and look at it
Mhm.
honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, like you're asking healthy questions to get folks not just maybe focusing on how they might relate to you in some of the darker points of your stories, but actually like reflecting on how you can craft hope around that.
Mm,
And you do that in your journey, right? You sort of you're painting these stories and I'm like, wow, geez, she's gone through a lot. But through all of that, you're finding hope on this other side
yeah.
and you're kind of doing it within community too. You're talking about your relationship with your family, you're talking relationship with your husbands, you're talking about relationship within your therapist.
Hmm.
And I think that that's kind of an important part of these stories is that, you can do a lot of internal work, but it's sort of the relational work that helps us kind of grow even further. So talk to me a little bit about how you find community as a powerful part of recovery.
Mm. I love that. And the relational piece is so important. We can be so in our own heads, and we have these beliefs and thoughts and ideas about how we are in the world, and only when somebody else is reflecting what they see, certainly it's mixed with their own perspective, don't get me wrong. We're not taking that as 100% truth, right?
Right.
But it gives you an opportunity. So being able to talk about how my different therapists and I work together and what was working and what wasn't working and where
Yeah.
I was struggling and where I was getting, reflection back that my own kind of stubbornness and willfulness was only hurting me, right? I wouldn't have understood that unless I had somebody else really showing me in a kind and gentle way, of course. And the same thing is true. I mean, everybody that we meet and we come across, whether it's a short exchange or, lifelong bloodlines, they're going to help us see ourselves in the world. And again, with that awareness, we have choice for how we want to show up in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Because ultimately, as we sort of like peel away these layers, we start to reveal our true self,
Mhm.
right? Where
Mhm.
we're able to sort of realign with, that God creation that we sort of begin with before we get all banged up, right? And it sort of takes us to do eternal work and to see ourselves in other folks and recognize that we can be empowered for change, that we start to cultivate this resilience, right? And I'm really curious about, what does resilience mean to you now that you've sort of like written this book? And I know it's taken some time,
Mhm.
and you're sort of cultivating it and trying to recognize it in everyday life. How are you defining resilience now?
Mm. For me, resilience is the way in which we can keep going, right? We get knocked down, we get back up. And understanding that that really is the way of the world. We're not going to come to anything new and be good at it. We're not going to come to, understanding some complex things without it muddying up the surface first until we can find clarity. And so for me, resilience is really active, and it's choosing to keep going even when it's hard and even when you can't actually see the pathway,
Sure.
may not have been unfolded yet, but,
Yes.
hopefully you can at least see the very next step. And if we just do that, it builds that resilience, step by step.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the reflections that you have in your chapter is you recognize the space that others provide you in order for you to maybe just sort of be who you are,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And even taking that to ourselves and recognizing there might not be an answer, reflecting that we can give ourselves space and
Yeah.
let ourselves sort of come to those answers when they're ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that timing, right? It's not
Yeah.
always in the timing we want, but the
Right.
clarity does come when we allow for the space. Yeah.
Right. Right.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR built to support you in the day-to-day work of running your business. If you're a health or wellness practitioner, you already know the care you provide starts well before your patient arrives and extends far beyond the treatment room. Jane is here to support every part of that experience. With online booking, your clients can book at a time that works for them, and with features like waitlist notifications, they'll be able to grab last-minute openings when they pop up. It's an easy way to keep your schedule full while getting your patients the care they need. During your appointment, Jane's AI-powered documentation feature can help you thoroughly take notes so you can stay present with the person in front of you. And after appointments, you can end your time together on a healing note, not a transactional one, by charging the card on file and rebooking before they head out. Personally, when I was looking for a therapist, Jane made the entire experience feel effortless. Booking an appointment was simple, I could choose the practitioner who felt right for me, and all my upcoming sessions were easy to see in one place. Jane even made it possible for me to join my appointments virtually through video calls, which fit perfectly into my schedule. And with built-in messaging, my therapist could check in with me between sessions, helping me stay supported and motivated throughout the week. Jane didn't just help me book an appointment, it helped me show up on time, stay engaged, and keep moving forward between sessions. To learn more about how Jane can support you and your patients, head to jane.app/demo. And if you're ready to get started with Jane, you can use our code TRIAD1MO or TRIAD1MO for 1 month grace period on your new account. When your work is about people, Jane supports the process. As we sort of talk about resilience and the stories that you're reflecting upon, do you have a favorite story that comes to mind in your book?
Mm. I think one of the stories that I love to share about resilience is I I don't remember exactly which chapter it is, but it's pretty close to embracing the tiger. But it's a story about walking. I'm doing this exposure practice of walking these bridges. And when I say bridges, I'm just talking about the second floor of a building that's got a little balcony, maybe a walkway, right? We're not talking about the Sears Tower
Right.
here. Eh, but that was something that I couldn't do by myself for many years. And there's a story in the book about how, as I'm practicing one day, I get stuck and I'm stuck on my way to go see my therapist. His office is in the hospital. It's got the skywalk from the parking ramp. Anyway, I'm stuck. I'm late to my appointment. I feel like a complete failure. I'm so embarrassed because I'm standing there in the middle of the walkway. And just the way, ultimately, I walk back to the parking ramp all the way down it, instead of taking stairs or an elevator. I'm literally walking, the spiral down the parking ramp over to the building. Anyway, I get there and I'm just so defeated. And, he encourages me to try again and we go together. And this is why support is so, so vital. And somebody who understands that first you need to do it together and then you can manage it on your own. And by the end, I don't want to give it all away, but but it's a powerful, like, two steps forward, one step back, or one step
Mhm.
forward, two steps back, right? Sometimes
Yes.
it's those things. And just understanding that, I think it's a really key example of resilience because I didn't give up. I didn't not go to my appointment. I was willing to try again.
Yeah.
And I think, again, with that keep going, it's resilience is this willingness to try again or to try a new and different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm in the middle of watching the new Charlie Sheen Netflix documentary.
Oh,
And
interesting.
in there, and again, there's kind of parallels. Again, just in how he's telling stories and creating meaning to it. I kind of found the same connection with yours, right? Your book, and it is very interesting because through everything that he's been through, he still found hope in other things. He's watching a basketball game, and that was his cue that recovery could be possible. You're going through these. I'm reading your book. You're going through it yourself. You're going through it with your therapist. You haven't given up hope. These are connections that I think are just so critical for us to share, that there can be hope that somebody else has gone through it, that you too can go through it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Being able to see on the other side of it
Yes.
or alongside of it,
Hmm.
And for me too, one of the ways in which I was able to keep that sense of hope of that there is something better, like I just knew that life wasn't supposed to just be suffering.
Hmm.
And I would try to find joy in the little things. Yeah, I haven't watched the documentary yet,
Yeah.
but it's in my queue. But I love that you spoke to, him saying, just being in the basketball game gave me,
Yes.
watching it. And, for me, that was music. It was listening to music, playing music, just finding ways in which small things can bring comfort and joy. Those are actually so much more important than the big things.
Mm. Yeah, I love that reframe. When we can mind down, we can bring ourselves back into the present. So much of anxiety is trying to predict the future, and it can be a huge, huge load. But
Yeah.
when we can start to bring things back into the present, we can start to cultivate, find these levers in which we can sort of pull that allows us to feel joy in the moment, bring us back into the present. Yeah, the rest of it kind of falls away. We can recognize, like, maybe I'm kind of going too far into the future. Let's come back to the present.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. So I also know resilience can be paired with self-compassion, and you do this within the book as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about how those two go together?
Mm. Yeah, I think it actually comes back to this conversation about shame. I feel like self-compassion is nearly shame's opposite, right?
Mm.
And the work of being compassionate with ourselves when things are hard or when it feels impossible to do the thing, that if we are met with more compassion and understanding, it provides more space for making a choice the next time or, in the next moment even. Because I mean, we've all got those inner critic voices, right? And the judgments and the added like, "Oh, I should have been able to do that," right? And, going back to that bridge example, "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed," right? Nobody's
Yeah,
actually looking
right.
at me. Nobody knows, what, "Oh, I'm such a failure." Like, all of those kind of, the critiques, the judgments, the shame about having this fear experience doesn't serve us any good. It doesn't change a darn thing.
Mm.
And and when I was able to reframe it into, okay, this is, I'm accepting this is what happened in this moment. This is what I had the capacity to do, and I'll try again
Yes.
another time.
Yes.
And that's okay. Like even the it's okay, I'm okay. Like it doesn't have to be some
Right.
big, self-loving mantra, but just the like it's okay.
Yeah.
The end. Like that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I'm often combating that voice of perfection, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes we have to recognize that 80% is okay. And it's
Right.
funny because I do it all the time, in business and in design and in the
Right.
podcast, right? Like I know that there's going to be another podcast and I'm going to do better, right? But that desire for perfection just can
Mhm.
get so loud. And
Yes.
just giving yourself that little bit of grace can be
Mm.
the extra that'll get you to go again. That'll get you to
Exactly.
show up next week.
Yep.
And I love how you're able to outline that, in your book and in this example. I know that you talk about trusting your gut, and trusting your gut can get a little twisted, especially when we're dealing with anxiety.
Yeah.
Anxiety can kind of turn us around, and we can get hijacked by our anxious brain. But
Mhm.
how do you distinguish between maybe anxiety's voice and true inner wisdom?
Mm. I love this question, right? That idea of trusting your gut is like, well, how can I when, anxiety is like makes me feel like I'm gonna throw up? Like
Right,
I just
right,
no, right? And I think the biggest thing I learned about discernment is, being able to figure out, okay, am I anxious because lizard brain is on fire right now, or is there truly something that I need to be looking at or considering before I go do this thing or make this choice or show up in this space, right?
right,
And what I found is looking at the evidence, especially any sort of past experience of a similar kind. I mean, if we're, sometimes it's just the choice to like go show up and, whether or not I break this plan for dinner with my friends, right? It could be
right,
something that simple. And you're, all the alarms and bells and whistles are going off and and your mind can take you in a million different directions. Oh, what does this mean? Something's going to happen. Maybe I need to stay home, la, 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 right? And that actually, the way that you just heard my voice and the, like, running around rampant,
right.
that's how you know it's anxiety.
Mm,
When you're feeling something and the mind is quiet, that's a point at which to listen,
Mm.
right? Even though anxiety and panic are very physical and visceral responses in the body, our body still holds wisdom. And if we can pay attention to when the brain and body are really working together, or when they're kind of working against each other, or you know,
Yeah.
then that's I mean, it's just a key to kind of unlock. And I always say, that's kind of the the first step in knowing, and sometimes we'll get it right, sometimes we won't, and that'll be clear too.
Yeah. No, I love this reflection upon maybe like the body language, right?
Mm.
And even recognizing, when we have that anxious brain, and cultivating safety around it. It is okay for our brain to just run.
Yeah.
When we can allow our brain to run in a safe space, we don't have to be fearful of that. We don't have
Yeah.
to act on it. And I love, because ultimately what you're trying to do is we're trying to give a pause. Maybe we don't
Mhm.
have to react immediately. And in those moments, as your brain is sort of running around, us trying to maybe navigate some of those signals, we recognize that after that there's peace, there's
Mhm.
stillness, and listen to that voice, and
Yeah.
cultivate what that's coming from.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and again, like, I know anxiety really comes from a place of fear. I want
Mhm.
to ask you, as you sort of, finish the book. I know it took quite some time. You mentioned 3 years.
Mm. Yeah.
And what is your relationship to fear now?
It is one of a daily practice.
Mm,
What I can say is what has been transformed is the way that I relate to it is much more accepting.
mm,
I allow it to be present instead of fighting against it, because the fighting against it and wishing I were just different didn't change anything.
yeah.
So being able to, bring it along with me, but not drive the bus, so to
Mm.
speak, is has been a game changer in my life.
Yeah, I think when we can sort of change our relationship to fear, we can recognize its signals differently,
Hmm.
right? We can recognize that it can actually do us some help, right?
Yeah.
We can sort of, if we understand those signals and maybe kind of mull it over a little bit more, we can start to get to what might be underneath, right?
Hmm.
Or just recognize maybe the healthier side of fear and what it's trying to tell me then.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And being able to practice discerning the difference.
Yes.
I had to learn that the fear itself wasn't dangerous,
Mm.
because I was doing everything I could to avoid feeling afraid.
Yes.
And it's a natural response.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and ultimately, like, really the only solution for it is through.
Yeah.
When I'm feeling it in my body, it shows up as a fear response within my body, and I can give myself a little pause, can take those moments and kind of slow down my breathing. I don't know, maybe I need metrics. I had a moment this last weekend where I literally had to use my watch in order to recognize that my heartbeat was slowing down, to recognize and give myself back
Mhm.
that safety, right?
Mm,
And some of these tools that we can sort of use to kind of get us to the other side, we can recognize that the fear isn't as scary. And it could be sort of a tool for us to navigate the world
yeah.
in a safer way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. So you talk about brave every day. What
Mhm.
does being brave in the everyday, those ordinary moments, maybe not just big ones, what does that look like? Because,
Mm,
and again, I want to sort of like reflect your book. In the beginning, in the very introduction, you talk about a very brave person trying to go on to the airplane and going through some of these dangerous locations. But your brave was just showing up every day. And redefining that was a huge shift because you're recognizing those little wins in your life. So
mhm.
so tell me, what is your definition of brave in every day? What does that look like?
I love it. Well, it really was this acceptance of the idea that bravery is a spectrum. And what's brave for one person is, maybe no problem for another or vice versa. And even for ourselves, what we have the capacity to do bravely on one day may look very different than another, right? So, depending on what other challenges or stressors there are in our lives, we don't have a full capacity to, like, do all the things that make us frightened. But it is really brave when, it feels like the world's on fire to just get up, to go brush your teeth, to make it to work. Like the effort it can take somebody on really hard days to do that absolutely needs to be celebrated. And we don't do that enough.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Again, there's just so much shame attached to anxiety and
Mhm.
our fears that it can really kind of weigh down, the achievements that we do in every day. And I do think that being able to take inventory of the successes and the wins can start to get you to cultivate your thoughts differently. And I think you're doing that within your journal prompts.
Mhm. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
inviting folks to sort of reflect in their lives about some of the wins or some of the ways that, they can talk to themselves differently.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, reframing the way we see ourselves, the way we see our progress. I mean, we're so ingrained as a society to always be productive and producing. And one of the things that actually produces a lot of that anxiety is not being able to rest or not being able to have the time to reflect and learn. And so, even that, I mean, this is like a brave invitation to, like, pause, just as you were saying. Like, sometimes we just got to pause and breathe, and that's a win.
Yeah.
What are we producing? We're producing a calmer nervous system. Like,
Yeah. Yes, we forget about those moments for ourselves.
yeah.
Just for ourselves to show up for us.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, for the listeners that might feel stuck in fear or overwhelmed right now, what's one piece of encouragement you'd like to share with them?
Mm. I just really want people to know that even if you can't see your way through, that there is a way through, and to just trust that things can shift. I mean, everything is temporary and you don't need to change everything in your life. But what is one small, like minuscule step that you can take that will, shift the boat in another direction?
Mm.
That 1 degree shift that we can take changes our trajectory in the long haul. And so, if in this moment when you're sitting here and you're listening to our voices or you're looking at, the YouTube video, I don't know, and you're thinking, you know, she's full of it. Just know I was there too. And I probably had the same thought. And just trust, if the sun rises every day, we can trust in that process. And the same is true for you. We can rise each day and it's brand new. Every moment is brand new, and we have the power to make another choice in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. When we become intentional and we recognize that we do have the power in ourselves to make changes, and you break it down to just that 1%, all you have to think about is that 1% each day and show up. I think it goes back to believing that there can be something different.
Yeah.
And I think you show that in your work, in some of the stories that I'm reading, and you're inviting listeners to sort of reflect on to their intentions and that
Mhm.
1% for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm curious. So I know you've written your book, Every Day I'm Brave. It's included your own memoir. Do you have an idea of what you'd like to write next?
I do have some thoughts percolating. There's probably another book coming. It's probably 3 to 5 years out. And, really about change and evolution. But one of the things that I'm noticing, especially as a former teacher, that I really want to offer something for the teenagers of the world because they are some of the bravest people I know right now. So we'll see what happens with that next. But I'm definitely writing, even if it's mostly in my head right now.
No, I love that. I love that direction, and I think when we can start to highlight the achievements for folks at such a young age, it
Yeah.
sets those foundations for building blocks later on.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, lastly, I just want to ask, where can people connect with you? I know you have a wait list on your website right now, and where can they find Every Day I'm Brave, your book?
Yeah, everydayimbrave.com is really the hub. You can find some resources there. You can find your way to we've started to curate a little Facebook group. So for anybody on Facebook, we've got the Everyday I'm Brave Facebook group. And yeah, you can just get on the list if you want to know more and be a part of it. One of the resources on the page actually is the journal prompts from the book, all in a singular PDF. So for those folks who want to just read the story and then come back to the journal prompts, I made it nice and easy for you to grab them in one.
I like that. I like that.
Mhm.
And again, the invitation to the Facebook group is a good one. You're cultivating community. You're trying to raise the voices of bravery and for folks showing up in their lives. So I appreciate that invitation.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Renee.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
And I want to thank you, our listeners, for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. If you like our show, please give us 5 stars and leave us a review. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today. We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.